All right. Well, this morning we get the privilege of looking at Matthew chapter 24. I just want to reiterate, I guess I need to go backwards a little bit. Just reiterate what Jesus spent chapter 23 totally annihilating, to use the internet terms nowadays, the scribes and the Pharisees, the hypocrites that they were, and how that they had killed all the prophets, and they were just as guilty of killing the old prophets because they were persecuting the current ones and the current speakers for God, like John the Baptist, for example. And they're about to, Jesus is speaking these things just like 2 or 3 days before he's nailed to the cross. So, and he knows what's about to happen. And the prophets, but now they're going to kill the Messiah. And so by what he says in verse 37, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets, those who are sent to her, how often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her under her wings, but you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I say to you, you shall see me no more till you say, blessed is he who..." I think I told this story once before about when I was preaching in northern Idaho, and I was riding motorcycle, some of the guys, and we came around this one corner up in the mountains, came around this one corner on the mountain dirt road, and right in front of us there was a mother grouse with all her babies, just tiny little thumb-sized little tiny babies, whole running around. They started, and but they didn't run away. And the first guy that was leading us, he had stopped his motorcycle, turned pardon me, turned it off and walked up to it and picked up one of the little ones. He had that little one, and we all stopped our motorcycles and got up there, and we were looking at that tiny little thing, so cute, and petting it and everything. And the rest had scattered, but he had managed to catch one before it got away. And we were just looking there admiring it. And then all of a sudden, out of this bush, there came this horrible noise. Just, I never heard a noise like that before. And all of a sudden, out comes the mama with her wings up like this and making herself as big as she possibly could make herself. And she comes charging towards us, making this awful noise, trying to scare us away. And she got close, but not too close, realized that wasn't working. And so she ran back into the bushes. And then in a little while, he was still holding it. We were still looking at it. All of a sudden, out of the bushes comes the mother, like this, dragging a wing, like she had a broken wing, and just coming towards us like she was and she came back and walking back to our motor. Things. And it was such
She knew how many she had.
Yeah, I'm sure she did. She kept calling. Okay. All right. Anyway, like I said, I'll just never forget that story. And that's how Jesus felt about the people of Jerusalem. How many times, I mean, we've been looking at the history of Israel for months now. How many times did he call them back together by the prophets? You know, come back to me, come back, come back, come back. And punishing them and calling them back. And how often I wanted to gather you together, just like a hen gathers her chicks, but you were not willing. You wouldn't let me do it. And then he says, so now look, your house is left unto you desolate. And I came across, I guess I didn't, came across a passage last night. I was reading in the book of Daniel, and I have to see if I can find it real quick. Get used to using the computer. Now I can't even turn pages. Oh. Well, now I can't. I was using a different Bible, and I remember where it was on the page on that one. But anyway, in either chapter 9 or 11, I believe there's a passage about the sanctuary being desolate, and it's talking about the time when Antiochus Epiphanes came and sacked Jerusalem. And anyway, it's the same language talking about the coming destruction of Jerusalem back then with Antiochus Epiphanes. And now Jesus is going to be talking about what we're going to see next in Matthew 24.
I first argued that he is holding them responsible for the sins of the fathers, but he is not. He's saying you are just as bad as they were.
Yeah, I mean, he says you're guilty of it because you're doing the same thing. So they're making themselves guilty, just like when we sin, it's like us being guilty of crucifying Jesus. We didn't actually crucify Jesus. We didn't shout out, crucify him, and all that. But the reason he was crucified is because of our sins. And so by that same principle, so he's bringing vengeance on them for all the deaths of all the prophets. And we'll see that as we go on through. But he says here, your house is left unto you desolate. What does desolate mean? Empty. There's nothing there. If you go out into the out onto the plains east of here, it's just empty, open space, nothing there. That's what he's talking about. Your house. What was their house? The temple. I mean, that was their house, and he says it's empty now. And what made the temple be anything was God's presence there in the Holy of Holies. And so what he's saying to them is God has left the building. You guys have pushed him as far as he can be pushed. Now your house is left unto you desolate. You're not going to see me anymore until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So that sets us up. Let's see. Well, let me just read regarding what you said, Gene. In Luke 11, he says, woe to you, for you build the tombs of the prophets, and your fathers killed them. In fact, you bear witness that you approve the deeds of your fathers, for they indeed killed them, and you build their tombs. Therefore, the wisdom of God also said, I will send them prophets and apostles, and some of them they'll kill and persecute, that the blood of all the prophets which was shed from the foundation of the world may be required of this generation. Yes, I say to you, it shall be required of this generation. That's the blood of all the prophets from the foundation of the world to the present time. As Jesus is speaking, that blood is going to be required of you folks, this generation. We all know what a generation is. Nowadays, we talk about the generation, the baby boomer generation, the generation Z, generation X, and what's that talking about? It's about going from one set of people to their children, to their children, to their children. Each one of those is a generation. And it's talking about, in the most broad sense, it's talking about all the people who are alive at the time of whatever it is spoken. When he says this generation, it means the people who are alive right now. There will be people remaining of this generation when all of this is happening. That sets us up for Matthew 24. 24 verse 1 says, then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said, do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say unto you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down. And so as his disciples are saying, look at this marvelous, wonderful place, that this house for God and all this majesty and glory. I mean, it rivaled anything in the world, Parthenon, anything else. It was an amazing complex, amazing building. And Jesus says, every stone is going to be taken down from this. Now, what would you think if I told you that the city of New York, every single building in New York is going to be leveled to the ground? When do you think that might happen? You're thinking this is going to be the end of life as we know it, the end of the world. That's not going to happen unless there's World War III, a nuclear holocaust or whatever. So the way we would think of that, that's the way they would think of Jerusalem and of this temple complex. God is protecting this. He lives there. He's not going to let anything happen to it. So if it gets torn down stone by stone, that means that's the end. Well, anyway, I wanted to look at this temple complex to get an idea of what Jesus is saying. Herod's temple was what was there at the time that these guys were looking at it and telling Jesus, look at all this stuff. It was about 35 acres. That's 34 football fields inside this whole complex. It was surrounded by colonnades that were 27 feet high. That's almost a 3-story building. The colonnades being surrounding it that you can see like here. And the temple building itself was 150 feet high. That's 15-story building. That's the temple itself. This part right here, 150 feet tall. And it wasn't even done yet. It had been 46 years building during Jesus's time, and yet it still wasn't finished. It wasn't finished until 64 AD. It was torn down 6 years later, stone by stone. Here's another picture. You see the court of the Gentiles here, the court of the women here, and then the court of the Jewish men could go there. And then inside only priests could go. And then all the way in the back, the most holy place, only the high priest could go. And that only once a year he could go back there. Gene?
Wailing wall, this end.
The wall was there. It's this wall right here. It was there, but it wasn't a wailing wall at the time. Okay, so no, pardon me. It was the wall below this is this whole wall here. If you go over and look down, that's the wailing wall. Okay, so yeah, this is the Jerusalem model in the city of Jerusalem itself. It's a really wonderful project. Hebrew University students built all this to try to make it an exact replica. And when they find out new discoveries, they'll change it, add different things to it. Anyway, what makes this really even more incredible is that all the documents relating to the existence of the nation of Israel were stored in these buildings, including all the genealogical records, the biblical manuscripts, all the legal records, all the records pertaining to the nation of Israel as a nation were stored in that building. When it was burned, all the records were burned. There's no more genealogy. Nobody can prove that they're Jewish or where they're, you know, I'm from the tribe of Levi or I'm from the tribe of Judah or whatever. Nobody can prove anything because all those records were lost. The scrolls, the biblical manuscripts were all gone. All their legal records that pertain to ownership of the land and all that kind of stuff, gone. And so from the time it was destroyed, there's no more Israel. Obviously, there were people that were Jewish, but as far as the nation of Israel and the Jewish way of doing things, of having sacrifices at the temple and the altar of burnt offering and the altar of incense and the golden candlestick and all that kind of stuff, that was all gone. There's no more of any of it. And so I wanted to show you this picture. In this picture, I took it myself. I'm standing on the Mount of Olives, right where Jesus stood and said, all that's there, not one stone will be standing upon another. The building that you see there, the Dome of the Rock, is standing on the exact location of the temple. The temple was torn down, and then centuries later, this Dome of the Rock was built. And as long as that Dome of the Rock is there, there could never be another temple, even if God intended for there to be one. That would have to get destroyed, which with God that would be easily done. But at any rate, that's causing a ton of consternation amongst the people that think there is going to be another temple built. And how are we going to get Jerusalem back the way it was so Jesus can come again? Well, let's look at what he continues. This is another picture that shows a little bit more of the complex. This is what's called the pinnacle of the temple, where Satan brought Jesus to tempt him to jump off. And so all of the superstructure, all the colonnades and everything that you saw in the other pictures were all in here. The royal portico was here, and all that kind of stuff was just it's all was torn down. And then this Al-Aqsa Mosque was built. The Dome of the Rock was built, and so you can see that it's totally level. You can go there today and see that there was not one stone left standing upon another. Okay, so Matthew continues. Now he sat on the Mount of Olives, right where that picture I just showed you. As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And so man, this is hard to hear, Jesus. When is that going to happen? How are we going to know? What's going to be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Some of the translations say end of the world. It actually is a Greek word aionios, which means an age or an eon. That's where we get the word eon from, Ionian or aionios. Anyway, so this is the correct translation, but what we need to ask ourselves before we go any further is, what is the question that they're asking? Are they asking, when's the temple going to come down? And when's the end of the world going to be? Well, let's look and see what Mark and Luke both say. Mark says, when they asked the question, they said, tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign when all things will be fulfilled? So the way Mark records it, they're not asking about the end of the world. They're saying, when's this going to happen? When is the temple going to be torn down stone by stone? And Luke says, so they ask him saying, teacher, but when will these things be? And what sign will there be when these things are about to take place? And so the things that has he been talking about the end of the world? Or was he talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, talking about the temple coming down stone by stone? What they're asking him is, when is the temple going to be torn down? That's the question. So it helps when you get the answer to know what the actual question was. And that's the question that they're asking, when is the temple going to come down? And Jesus answered them, take heed that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So first of all, he mentions some things that are going to happen before the end happens. And false Christs are going to come, for one thing, and there'll be wars, rumors of wars. But he says, you'll see all this troubling stuff happen, but don't worry, it's not quite time yet. So then he starts to answer the question. First part of the question is when it won't be. He's going to answer when it won't be first, and then answer when it will be. So just in verse 4, he says, and Jesus answered and said to them, pardon me, I just already read that. So in verse 7, it says, for nation will rise up against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. And so some people today look, oh, there's earthquake over here, and there's pestilence, there's a famine over here. That must be coming the end of the world. Well, what he's answering is their question. When is the temple going to come down? When are there going to be no stone left standing upon another one? He says all these are the beginning of sorrows, not the finish. All these bad things happening. Well, there's a real scholarly guy that wrote a bunch of commentaries. His name is Alford. And in his commentary on Matthew, he cites such non-Christian historians as Josephus, Tacitus, and Suetonius in the telling of 3 threats of war against the Jews by the Romans, 3 uprisings of Gentiles against the Jews in which many thousands of Jews were killed, an indefinite number of famines, at least 1 pestilence in which 30,000 people died in Rome alone, and 5 earthquakes, all before 70 AD. From the time of Jesus's death until the time of 70 AD, all of these things happened according to Josephus, Tacitus, Suetonius, and perhaps other historians. All of the things that Jesus said was going to happen: famines, pestilence, earthquakes, wars, rumors of wars. They all happened before 70 AD. I guess I tried to get too cute there. Anyway, I was supposed to do the arrows as I read all these things. Anyway, all of this happened before 70 AD. So he continues in, well, with that in mind, the last thing he said was, oh, pardon me. Let's see, what am I doing here? Okay, I got this thing in my slide that I didn't want to be there. Got to figure out how to get rid of it. Well, I'll just have to. Oh well. I hope I don't mess things up, but I didn't really want to do that. Hold on. Well, okay. I was afraid. I was afraid of that. Okay. How do I get the slideshow going again? Okay, let me make that smaller, make this bigger. I'm not, let me know, Keith, if this is coming across in 20 seconds, it should show up. Okay. This was the beginning of sorrows. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all the nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. The last thing here, it says the gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world, and then the end will come. Well, the passage that I took off of there that was a passage from Colossians that says, Paul says, the gospel has been preached in all creation. So by the time Paul wrote Colossians, the gospel had been preached in all creation. So sometime after, that was about 64 AD or somewhere 63, 64 AD when Paul wrote Colossians. So that part of what Jesus said was going to happen before the end came, happened around 63 AD. All these other things happened, as I told you, before 70 AD. And Jesus is talking to the disciples and say, they will deliver you up. Now, if they all die natural causes or whatever, let's see, what am I trying to say? He's telling them that this is going to happen to you, and then the end will come. So it had to happen in their time, because if they came and went, this prophecy would mean nothing. He's not talking about you and you and you and you when he says this. A lot of people, when they read it, oh no, he's talking to me. No, he was talking to his disciples. And he says, you will be delivered up to tribulation. Notice tribulation. The book of Revelation talks about the great tribulation. That's what he's talking about. Many will be offended, which means caused to stumble. They'll do all these things. Well, let's look next then if that's when it won't be until all those things happen. Now, when it will be, Jesus answers this question, when it will be. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. This is either referring to Jesus. Either Jesus is saying it as a sideline. Whoever reads, let him understand. In other words, if you're a reader of the Old Testament, pay attention, because this is what I'm talking about. Or Matthew is adding it there for the same purpose. You need to read. You need to know the Old Testament in order to understand what he's talking about. Anyway, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. So if you see this abomination of desolation, let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Well, the abomination of desolation, what is that? In Daniel chapter 11, Jesus said, as spoken of by the prophet Daniel, he says, and forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress, and then they shall take away the daily sacrifices and place there the abomination of desolation. So this is forces being mustered and gathering up to defile the sanctuary. Sanctuary is the most holy place in the temple. And so he's talking about forces being mustered, and they're going to place the abomination of desolation there. He's talking about the forces gathering up to do sacrilegious things in the temple or in the sanctuary. The next another place in Daniel 12, it says, and from that time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there should be 1,290 days. Anyway, Daniel is talking about this abomination of desolation, talking about forces gathered to come in and, like I said, do abominable things in the temple. Well, we'll save that for later. Luke 21, when he says this, in the exact same place in Luke where Matthew says, when you see the abomination of desolation, then you'll know, then let those in Judea flee to the mountains. The way Luke words it is, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. So the way Luke records what Jesus is saying about when you see the abomination of desolation, he interprets it properly by saying, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. What was going to happen was the armies were going to surround it, and they were going to come in and they were going to desecrate the temple, take all the gold things out of it, and they came in and set up an idol to the emperor, this kind of thing. They created, they did abominable things in the temple. But the reason I'm put Luke in here is because when Jesus says, when you see the abomination of desolation, Luke says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies. That's what he means. That's what Daniel was talking about, the forces gathering to commit abominable things in the sanctuary. And that's what's happening. That's what Jesus says, when you see the abomination of desolation, what he's talking about is when you see the armies coming, the forces gathered together, coming to desecrate the temple. When you see that, then let all those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go in to take anything out of his house. Let him who is in the field not go back and get his clothes. Now, if this was talking about the end of the world, what difference does it make whether you did anything? It wouldn't make any difference. And Jesus says, but woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing babies in those days. What difference is it going to make at the end of the world when Jesus comes back? Does it make a difference? Women with babies are going to be gathered together to be with Jesus. And why bother to flee to Judea? Get out of here, get out of Judea, because where can you go from God? When the end of the world happens, you're not going to go anywhere. Everyone will be gathered up, and judgment will happen. Pray that your flight may not be in the winter or on the Sabbath. Again, Jesus is saying, when you get out of here, hope it's not the winter time, because that makes it harder to travel. And on the Sabbath, you're not allowed to travel more than 7/8 of a mile. So it'll make it a little rough trying to get away. If you can only go less than a mile, you're not going to get very far away from the Romans, these soldiers that are gathering in that time. And so he says, then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time. No, nor shall ever be. So he says there's going to be a tremendous tribulation that will happen. None like it ever before, none like it ever again. And so the tribulation that he's talking about here totally fits the book of Revelation, the Great Tribulation. This Great Tribulation is pictured in the Revelation. If a worse tribulation had just happened 20 years before, Revelation doesn't make any sense. So that's the tribulation that he's talking about. And he says, it hasn't been like it before, nor will there ever be another tribulation like this. Unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, Mark says, whom he chose, the people, those who were chosen, those days will be shortened. Who are the chosen? We're all chosen. We're an elect race, a chosen people for God's own possession. That's the church. And for their sake, for the church's sake, the days would be shortened in the destruction that's about to take place. Now, I'm going to look at some stuff, but just so that nobody has any questions in their mind going on until next week, I want to look ahead just a minute. I'm going to read a bunch of stuff from Josephus, but I won't have time to do it all today. But I wanted to. I can't see. Let me just see. Okay, I need to go back. Look at verse 34. When verse 33 says, so you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. Assuredly, I say unto you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. So everything that he talks about up to verse 34, which we'll have to look at some more stuff, but everything that he talked about, not one stone left standing upon another, the tribulation, everything that we've just looked at, all the infighting and everything, he says that's going to happen in this generation. Some of you here alive this day will no wise taste of death, that you see the kingdom come with power. That's what he's saying here. This generation is going to be still here when all this stuff takes place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. What I'm telling you now, even if the heavens and the earth were to pass away, what I'm saying is going to come true. And so he's just using a superlative there, but he says it's going to happen in this generation. And so just keep in mind that when we go back to when we go back here, the Great Tribulation and all that stuff, he's going to say in a few verses that everything I'm telling you right now is going to happen in this generation. Any questions or comments? I had hoped to get a lot further than this. Anyway, I'm going to read you some stuff from Josephus next week that'll just blow your mind. It's awful. I hate to read it, but Josephus hated to write it down too, and he said it here. And one of the things that I'm going to read, I feel horrible telling these things, but I wouldn't be doing justice to my people. Josephus was a Jewish general that had defected to the Romans to save his own life, and said that and he would write a history of the Jewish people if they would just let him live. And so he did write this. So anyway, next week we're going to look at some stuff from Josephus. Any questions or comments? Okay, if not, class dismissed. Again, I apologize for not getting further where I wanted to go. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. Our scripture reading this morning is Matthew 15:31. So the multitude marveled when they saw the mute speaking, the maimed made whole, the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they glorified the God of Israel. We'll see that in a little bit. Last week, or last time, it's been 3 weeks ago, I guess, we talked about Jesus having a clash with the tradition of the scribes and Pharisees over the eating a meal without washing their hands. Some of the disciples apparently hadn't washed their hands, and so the scribes, Pharisees raked Jesus through the coals for that, because their tradition said that you have to wash your hands thoroughly before every meal. And Jesus dealt with that and said, it's not what goes in through the mouth, it's what comes out of the mouth that defiles the body. Well, Jesus is in Capernaum when he did these things, and had this clash. And so after this, he heads north, and for some reason that we don't really know for sure, he heads all the way out of Israel. And he goes way up, as it says in Matthew 15, verse 21. And Jesus went out from there and departed into the region of Tyre and Sidon. Now, these are Phoenician cities from of old time, cities that had been prophesied about, and their destruction had already taken place according to the prophecy when finally Alexander the Great came and totally destroyed Tyre and Sidon. But what Jesus did to see it on the map is he started, as you can see, Capernaum is right there. And so he left Capernaum and he went north up through the region of Tyre and Sidon. It doesn't actually say that he ever went to actual city of Tyre or Sidon, but he went to that area. But somewhere, wherever he went, it was a place that had houses, because Mark says that he entered a house and wanted no one to know it, but he could not be hidden. So even way up in Phoenicia, he probably was trying to go up and just get away from everybody for a while, to actually get some rest, like he had already tried a time or two before. But he gets up there, goes in the house and says, don't tell anybody I'm here. But it seems like with Jesus, every time he says, don't tell anybody, what happens? People start going around telling it. And so he couldn't be hidden. And so as we go back to Matthew, it says, and behold, a woman of Canaan came from that region and cried out to him. Now, this woman of Canaan, Mark says that she was a Syro-Phoenician, which means Syria and Phoenicia, that whole area. Those of you that have been in the class that we've been studying some of the Old Testament history in the Intertestament period. During that Intertestament period, there was a group of people called the Seleucids who ruled the northern territory. Let me just go back to the map for a second. The whole area up here, and then up around the top of the Mediterranean Sea, was ruled by the Seleucids, and these were all Gentiles, and they really basically, for most part, had nothing to do with God of the Jewish people. They had their own idolatrous gods. So he's going up into Gentile territory, and this Canaanite woman, Canaan had referred at one time to the whole land, but it was as Jesus is referring to it, or as Matthew referring to it, the Canaanites. Remember, they were the ones that were there before Israel was even formed, and so there were still Canaanites still surviving after all these years. Anyway, she came and cried to him, saying, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, son of David," which is kind of interesting because she's a Syro-Phoenician. She's not a Jew, not an Israelite, but she calls him Lord and son of David. So she knew something about this whole business. So somebody had been at least trying to proselytize her at some point, and had told her about the son of David and this sort of thing. She recognized a Gentile. Half the people in Israel didn't recognize Jesus as son of David, but she calls him son of David. And she says, "My daughter is severely demon possessed." But he answered her not a word. He's walking along through town, and she comes up behind him perhaps, or from the side or whatever. "Have mercy on me, Lord. My daughter is possessed by demons severely. Please have mercy on me." He just walked on by, didn't say a word. Seems out of character for Jesus to just, it's like snubbing his nose to this woman. But he walks right by, and his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she cries out after us. She's bugging us. She keeps saying, 'Help, help, help, save me, save my daughter.' So tell her to get out of here. She's bugging us," which doesn't speak that well for the disciples either. So it doesn't look like a good picture happening here. But as we know, Jesus many times did things in order to prove a point, or in order to show a lesson of some sort. And we're going to see by how he continues what he was doing. He answered and said, "I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Here she is, a Syro-Phoenician woman. She's not of the house of Israel, let alone one of the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And so he just says, "I wasn't sent to those folks." That makes me cringe when I hear that a little bit. Sounds a bit racist, doesn't it? I'm only going to talk to these folks over here. The rest of the people, that's not who I was sent to talk about. Well, it may seem like it, may sound like it, but when we start thinking about it, we'll see that really isn't the case. Through the nation of Israel, these ones that he said he was sent to, that lost sheep of the house of Israel, through this nation, God showed his power, his omniscience, that's all-knowing, so that he knows stuff, knows everything. His omnipresence means he's present everywhere. His foreknowledge, being able to know ahead of time what's going to happen, all the prophecies and everything. God had prophesied to all about Israel or to Israel, and he was showing not just to Israel, but we'll see in just a second, his righteousness as well. He didn't put up with evil forever. He was long suffering. He allowed things to go on for a long time, giving people a chance to repent. His mercy and his providence, providing for all things to come together and work his plan. He showed all of these things through the nation of Israel, not just these things, but many more things as well. And not just to Israel, but to the whole world. He in Ezekiel chapter 38, he says, "Thus I will magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I will be known in the eyes of many nations. Then they shall know that I am the Lord." The things that he did with Israel, part of it was to show to all these nations who the Lord really was, who Jehovah really was, the God of all gods. And then there's also the verse that we're also familiar with, John 3:16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes on him should not perish, but have everlasting life." And so there's no question that God loves the whole world, not just the Jewish folks and not just the Syro-Phoenician ladies or whatever. He loved the whole world. So if people want to think that Jesus was racist, he wasn't. He gave his life for every single race. And the reason that he went only to the Jews was because he was limited in his ability to get around. He couldn't cover the whole world in the time that he had. And his job was to preach the gospel and let people know that he was the Messiah and all the things that he did in his own earthly ministry. But it was to the Jews. And so he said that. Meantime, this woman hears that. "I was not sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Well, then she came and worshiped him, saying, "Lord, help me. I don't care if you're only supposed to talk to the Jews. Help me." But he answered and said, "It's not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs." Once again, that doesn't sound too kindly. He's making a point, giving her an opportunity, which she takes. What she did was she said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from their master's table." Here's a picture, little dogs eating from the master's table. We all know about that. And she brings that point up. Yeah, I know, but even the dogs, he's just called her a dog, along with all of her race, called her a little dog. And she said, "Yeah, but the little dogs even get to eat the crumbs." And to that, Jesus answered her and said, "Oh, woman, great is your faith." This is why he behaved the way he was behaving, to give her this chance. And when she took it, he said, "Oh, woman, great is your faith." She believed that Jesus had enough power to have leftovers, not just to heal the people of the house of Israel, the lost sheep of the house of Israel, but enough power that there would be leftovers for the little dogs to eat. So Jesus said, "Let it be to you as you desire." And her daughter was healed from that very hour. And so this shows a little bit about Jesus's flexibility. Jesus can do whatever he wants. He wasn't sent to her. He just said it. "I was only sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." He wasn't sent to the Gentiles. But yet he made an exception because of this woman's great faith. You have people, the thief on the cross business, where where people say, well, if baptism is for remission of sins, then what about the thief on the cross? Well, Jesus can make exceptions whenever he wants to. If he wanted to make an exception, he could, not a problem. Well, he made an exception here, and she was very happy about it. And there are some traits that I wanted to mention for just a minute that this Greek woman had that we would do well to copy. Sometimes people, well, the Jewish folks for sure, look down their noses at all the other people of the world. And so a person that was a Greek was a geek or something, whatever, however they viewed it, wasn't a good thing. But look at the things that she had that we really ought to have. First of all, humility. She said, yeah, even the dogs eat. I know I'm a dog, but at least we can eat the crumbs, can't we? She also had a maternal instinct. Class this morning, we talked about what Jesus said, how often I would wanted to gather you up as a hen wants to gather up her chicks, that maternal instinct. Well, she had that. She was fighting tooth and toenail to try to get her daughter healed of this demon possession. Respect. She worshiped Jesus. She said, Lord, and thou son of David. She respected him. Sometimes we don't respect God like we should, and question the things he does in our lives and things like that, kind of insolently, I guess you would say. This woman showed respect that she had. She had prayer. Have mercy on me, Lord. Uttering a prayer to him to help her in her time of need. She was very perceptive. She read the situation. We need to be perceptive too, and when we have encounters with people, and try to read the situation and see what's really going on with them and what's happening in their minds, so that we can react properly to them. She read the situation, could tell what was going on, and she tried to make the best of it. Well, she also had patience. She kept following after, Lord, help me, Lord, help me. She didn't get mad and start throwing things or whatever. She just kept trying. With that in mind, she had persistence. She didn't stop. She didn't cease asking until she obtained what she desired. She just kept at it. That's something we often fall short of, persistence. Sometimes we give up too soon. She was intuitive, thinking on her feet. She had no idea Jesus was going to say what he said, but as soon as he said, I'm not supposed to give the children's food to the little dogs, she instantly thought on her feet and said, yeah, but even the dogs eat the crumbs. What did I put up? Or tactful. Yeah, she was very tactful as well. Instead of just getting mad at him and saying, why can't you help me? You're helping everybody else. She used tact and said, yeah, even the little dogs eat. Can you throw me a break here? She also had great faith. Jesus said, oh, woman, great is your faith. She believed Jesus could do it, even without affecting anything that he was doing for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So these are just some of the traits that this woman had that we would do well to try to make part of our life. Anyway, after this event, then Matthew 15:29 says, Jesus departed from there and skirted the Sea of Galilee and went up on the mount and sat down there. And so Jesus leaves. Mark actually says he went through Sidon, and so he leaves from Sidon up there and goes down, skirts the Sea of Galilee, and then goes up into the mountain there. So now we find him after he's gone way up north into Tyre and Sidon area. He comes back down to the mountain, same area where he had preached the Sermon on the Mount. And he goes up into the mountain, and just like he did many times, he goes up there to pray, but he doesn't get left alone. Well, Mark, I want to go to Mark for a second. Mark chapter 7, verse 31 to 37, it says, again, departing the region of Tyre and Sidon, he came through the midst of the region of the Decapolis to the Sea of Galilee. And then they brought to him one who was deaf and had an impediment in his speech. And they begged him to put his hand on him. And he took him aside from the multitude and put his fingers in his ears and spat and touched his tongue. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. So looking up to heaven, sighing, Ephphatha, be opened, your ears and your mouth. And immediately his ears were opened and the impediment of his tongue was loosed, and he spoke plainly. When I was growing up as a kid, 10 to 12 years old, I had my best friend at the time. His name was Gary, and he lived up the street, and he had a brother that was quite a bit older than him, whose name was Donald, and he was deaf. And they had moved from Pennsylvania to Arizona, to Tucson, where there was the Arizona School for the Deaf and Blind, which is a renowned school. And he was going there trying to learn some speech, even though he was totally deaf. And I just remember hearing him always trying to say words out, but he could only feel vibrations in his chest or in his head when his vocal cords would move, and to try to determine how that was supposed to work to make a sound that was intelligible to people was a big job. And I remember him trying to talk, and the reason he couldn't talk was because he couldn't hear. And so if he had been healed of his hearing, then he would be able to hear those sounds and learn to speak as well. But this guy just didn't learn to speak. He began to speak plainly immediately when this happened. And so this was amazing. And then Jesus said he commanded them that they should tell no one. But the more he commanded them, the more widely they proclaimed it. And they were astonished beyond measure, saying, he has done all things well. He makes both the deaf to hear and the mute to speak. This guy is incredible. It's amazing. They're just seeing miracle after miracle from Jesus. Well, then great multitudes came to him, having with them lame, blind, mute, maimed, and many others, and they laid them down at Jesus' feet, and he healed them. He didn't just make them go away, dismiss them, say, look, I'm trying to get some rest here. You guys take off. He healed them. And so the multitude marveled when they saw the mute speaking, the maimed whole, the lame walking, the blind seeing, and they glorified the God of Israel. Man, God, you are something else. To be able to have a man here representing you, being able to do all these things, how awesome you must be. And so while these people were all gathered together, it says great multitudes had come to him. We're going to find out that it was 4,000 people, 4,000 men besides women and children. And so we have the occasion that we call the feeding of the 4,000. I'm not going to read about this one. You can read it for yourself in Matthew 15, but it's exactly the same thing that happened with the feeding of the 5,000, only instead of 5 loaves and 3 fish, it was 7 loaves and a few small fish. And instead of 12 baskets full left over, there were 7 large baskets left over. But the same thing happened, and the disciples had acted the same way. How are we going to feed all these people? But Jesus, he didn't upbraid them this time. I don't know why. I would have. Weren't you there when I fed the 5,000? Why are you worried about me feeding 4,000? But he didn't. At least it's not recorded by Matthew, who was one of the ones that was right there helping to feed the 4,000. Maybe that's why he didn't say anything about it, perhaps being embarrassed. Who knows why? Bottom line is, it was the feeding of the 4,000, another tremendous miracle added to the list of all his miracles so far. Well, once he had gotten done, the reason he fed them is he said, they've been around for 3 days following after me. I don't want to send them home hungry because they might faint along the way. And so once he gets them fed, then he sent the multitude away, got into the boat, and came to the region of Magdala. And so he left the hillside, the mountain area, on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which he had skirted the Sea of Galilee, gone up to the mountain. He left there and went over to Magdala, which is the area where Mary Magdalene was from. And we're not told why he went there, just that he did go there. And while he was there, the Pharisees and Sadducees seek after a sign from heaven. Again, you'd think they would get the message at some point, but I'm not going to read about this one either, because they get the same answer as they had gotten before when they asked for a sign from heaven. And that answer was the sign of Jonah. As Jonah has been was in the belly for 3 days, so I will be in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. But he also adds a harsh addition to what he had said before. He's getting a little impatient with them. He answered and said to them, "When it's evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and threatening. Hypocrites, you know how to discern the face of the sky, but you can't discern the signs of the times." These guys were picking and choosing what they were understanding, and he calls them just hypocrites, because they knew enough to read what was going on, and the fact that if he could do all this stuff, he didn't need to call down a sign from heaven like they were asking for. And so he left them, and getting into the boat again, he departed to the other side. So we see Jesus doing some traveling. He goes back the other way, same way he had just gone, goes back to the other side again. So now we've seen him go north and then go south, then go west, now going east, going all directions in his travelings. And this is just in a short period of time. Well, he departed to the other side, and Matthew says, now when his disciples had come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. Then Jesus said to him, "Take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees." And they reasoned among themselves, saying, "It's because we've it's because we've taken no bread." But Jesus, being aware of it, said to them, "Oh, you of little faith, why do you reason among yourselves, because you have brought no bread?" Then he says, "Do you not yet understand or remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000, and how many baskets you took up? Nor the 7 loaves of the 4,000, and how many large baskets you took up? How is it you do not understand that I did not speak to you concerning bread, but to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees?" Well, then they understood that he did not tell them to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And so he says, "You have little faith. I don't care if you forgot to bring bread or not. Don't you think I can provide bread for us? Food, that is. You just saw the feeding of the 5,000. You just saw the feeding of the 4,000 with a lot left over. I can feed you guys. How is it you don't understand that I wasn't talking about bread at all? I was talking about the leaven, the influence." Jesus had said, "Take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees." What that tells us is a little false teaching can spread like leaven in a lump of dough. How much leaven is it that you put in to make a whole loaf of bread? Just a tiny little bit. Put that in there, and it just starts reacting and reacting and reacting. And next thing you know, you got this lump of dough that started out this big, puffed up into a loaf this big. Well, a little false teaching can do the same thing. That's why Jesus said, beware of the leaven of the Sadducees and Pharisees. A lot of damage can be done. And of course, the Sadducees and Pharisees had done a ton of damage. We've been studying in the class how much junk had gone on and how messed up the children of Israel were at this particular time, how lost they were, and how Jesus could have looked out on them and saying, I just see a bunch of lost sheep. They don't know where they're going. They don't know what, and how he could have compassion on him. But what we learn from this is Jesus says, be aware, pay attention to what you're hearing, what they're saying. They probably said some good stuff. I mean, if they're reading from the scriptures, obviously they're saying some good stuff, but they're also teaching some false doctrine, which we need to be aware of. And today in our lives, there's a lot of false teachers out there, people who say a lot of right things, but they also can say some very damaging things. We need to be aware and also beware. Watch out, because it can do a lot of harm. Well, to sum things up, what have we learned about Jesus today? Jesus was patient with his disciples, patient with this lady. He was kind, took care of this lady. He was compassionate, had mercy on her, had mercy on the 4,000 people. He was flexible. He wasn't supposed to be talking to anybody besides the lost sheep of the house of Israel, but he healed this woman's, who was a Syrophoenician. He healed her daughter of the demon possession, going off the beaten path, so to speak, to do so. He was not afraid to tell it like it is, called the scribes and Pharisees hypocrites, because they were seeking after a sign. And we also learned that he wants to provide for our needs. How many times have we seen him providing for the needs of people, showing that he not only can, but he wants to as well. He can provide for our needs as well. Well, we're going to sing a song in a moment. Jesus is tenderly calling. He wants you to come so that he can minister to you, so that he can take care of your needs. And he says in another place, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. We can find that rest, but we have to come to him. Come unto me. Jesus is calling right now. If you need to come and be obedient to the gospel, come while we stand and sing this song.